So let's talk about this climax community. So the climate will actually determine the type of climax community. So for example, if we go out to the Midwest and there's just not enough rain to allow large trees to be formed, we might have the grassland. So it kind of stops at that point where the grasslands are. So what is climate? So climate is just a pattern of weather over a long period of time. And how is climate different from weather? Well, it's a long period of time, and some of the factors that you might see that affect the climate are the amount of precipitation, the temperature, the distance from the equator. Why is this climax community most stable? Well, the biodiversity. Didn't like that. The amount of biodiversity. It has the most interactions possible. Okay, now this other term comes up. Primary succession when you start from bare rock, no soil at all. Secondary succession occurs when, well, there was a previous community there and it was destroyed, but what was left behind was soil. So what kind of natural disasters could we have? Well, we could have volcanic eruptions, natural forest fires, tornadoes, tsunamis, ice storms. Again, if the soil remains, like after a forest fire, you're talking about secondary succession. If the soil is removed, pulled away, like after a glacier retreats, then you're back to primary, back to bare rock. Okay, so what kind of human activities could disrupt a climax community? So anything that might deforest an area, like lumberjacking, humans set fires, tearing down whole ecosystems for the building of homes, businesses, and roads. So now I want you to think about that. The difference between primary and secondary is whether there is, if it's primary, there is no soil. Secondary, there is soil. So which one would take longer? Hopefully you picked primary. Primary would be right because there are not many nutrients in the ecosystem because the soil has been removed. So you have no soil. That's the big key part. No soil. Get that out of the way there. Okay, so this last part here, I want you to write down a little bit as you watch, as we transition into this video that I found on YouTube about the eruption of Mount St. Helens. It's about 3 minutes long, 3.5 minutes long, but it's about the last minute that you really want to start to write some things down. The first 3 minutes are very interesting about how the eruption took place. But I want you to write down about, once the eruption took place, the changes in life that took place. Like write down some of the different plants and things that you see or they mention. Okay?
It was really an overpowering experience, and it still is.
Volcanologist Don Swanson was sent to Mount St. Helens in March 1980 to join a team of USGS geologists monitoring the volcano.
It was pretty startling, actually, and of course initially we thought the measurements were incorrect, and so we repeated them over and over again and kept getting the same results. So then we knew we had to accept them and that the mountain was doing something that we really hadn't anticipated.
The activity at Mount St. Helens drew many to the area, including Trixie Anders and her friend James Fitzgerald. They were both geologists working on their PhD in volcanology. Anders says they had to be there.
I mean, a good volcanologist could not stay away from a volcano erupting in their backyard.
They found a spot on nearby Spud Mountain with a great view of the volcano. It was in an area designated to be safe. On May 18, 1980, Anders and her husband planned to meet up with Fitzgerald at their lookout point at sunrise. Well, Anders says on the drive up to the meeting place, her husband insisted on stopping for breakfast. When they got to the turnoff to Spud Mountain, it was 8:32 a.m. and Mount St. Helens erupted.
My first reaction was, oh my God, Jim's up there getting great pictures. I knew we should have been up there. I'm angry. And then in less time it took me to explain that to you, I realized, oh my God, we're going to die because it's coming so fast.
It was a 5.1 magnitude earthquake that triggered the eruption and a massive landslide that released pressure built up from the magma in the volcano. That sent out a lateral blast of 24 megatons of thermal energy. The ash cloud reached 80,000 feet in just 15 minutes. Don Swanson jumped in a helicopter.
It was almost unbelievable. We had to believe it because we could see it, but it was one of these things that we just kept going and going and going in the helicopter, and we kept crossing down forest, and the debris avalanche went way down the valley. So it was a very remarkable experience, scientifically and then emotionally too, that first day.
Swanson's friend, geologist David Johnston, was killed in the lateral blast. He was set up at a lookout point just north of the volcano.
It was quick, but it would have taken enough time for this blast cloud to have reached him that he would have seen it coming.
Swanson was actually scheduled to be at that lookout point the day of the eruption, but he had asked Johnston to switch with him. Well, 4 days after the eruption, Anders learned her friend James Fitzgerald suffocated at Spud Mountain.
You just suffocate because there's no oxygen and it's hot. It burns your lungs. It's an awful way to die. It's not an immediate way to die. You suffer.
In 1982, the 110,000-acre Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument was created, allowing for the environment to renew naturally. Peter Frenzen, the monument scientist, has been at St. Helens since right after the eruption.
For us, the most important initial discovery was that the area was not lifeless. And as we were able to get access and poke around, we quickly discovered that early spring, that May eruption in the high mountains, had allowed many things that were dormant at the time of the eruption to survive. And there were sprigs of new life, young plants coming up in little protected pockets throughout the blast zone. Now, 30 years later, what had been mostly open, empty, and largely lifeless looking, it wasn't lifeless, has now become covered in a carpet of wildflowers with birds and wildlife, and it's just an amazing place to see the combination of all that natural beauty and, of course, overlain on the fury of what happened 30 years ago.
Okay, so some pretty interesting stuff there. I really found it fascinating right after that explosion. Some of the people were just, very dangerously close. But anyway, hopefully you noticed that it didn't take nearly as long as they had expected it to. You can see some of the wildflowers almost right away. Personally, I had visited Mount St. Helens twice, about a year or so afterwards. And although there were some things growing, it was amazing to see. It almost, to me, I just remember it's like someone took a large comb and just combed all the trees down. Amazing. But then about 10 years after it had taken place, how much life was there? It was like, wow, just in 10 years, what the changes had taken place. Anyway, hope that helps, and hopefully you can get ready for this mastery quiz coming up and the unit exam on ecology.